Right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, somebody's awake. That's good. I'm assuming there's nobody else. If they do, they'll have to come in halfway through and tough. My name's Derek Woodroffe. I've built a hell of a lot of stuff with Raspberry Pis, but the latest one is my Fixie Clock, which has usefully just died. How about that for timing? You can't trust IT, can you? So, the Fixie Clock. Why? I was sat at home and I had a few OLED displays. Now, I assume you all know what OLED displays are. They're fairly boring. These are particularly boring black and white displays. I had about 5 or 6 of them, and I was wondering something to do with them. Anybody on Twitter? Silence. Oh no, couple. Have you heard of Makevember? A friend of mine runs Makevember every year, strangely enough in November. Come on in, you're welcome. Sit down, we won't make fun. No, I shouldn't do that. And so every November, he just runs a little thing on Twitter to post your builds. The whole idea of that is you start with something you've never done before and just play with it. So I'd never driven these OLEDs before, and I wanted to play with making a fake Nixie clock. I'll come into what a Nixie is later on. I'm a fan of steampunk, so Nixies and steampunk tend to go together, having that sort of retro kind of vibe, and especially the valves. The other thing that I realised is that using OLEDs is probably a better way. The Nixie tubes are from the 70s. They require 300 odd volts for them to run and quite a complicated driver, where OLEDs are really, really simple. 4 wires, I2C, you've got a display. And I needed something that I could build in small steps. This is because of that. If any of you have had a puppy, you will realise that doing anything for any long periods of time gets very, very difficult. That is a small German Shepherd. He's now quite a big German Shepherd. So I needed something I could do in loads of little hits. So we started with the Nixie clock. So the OLED displays, there are some, if you haven't seen them before, they are very, very cheap. From China, you can get them for around £3-4 each. In fact, if you get them in bulk, you can get them even cheaper than that. They're quite nice little displays. They'll give you, I can't actually remember what the resolution is now. I think it's about 600 by 400 pixels, something like that. But they are totally black and white. No grayscale, just on and off. Which makes them pretty hideous, really. When you're running them, there's no nice edges to any of your fonts or anything else. They are on and off. But they're cheap, they have no high voltage, they're easy to drive with I2C. A couple of the problems with them though. Although they sit on an I2 bus, there are only 2 options for an address, which means you can only have 2 on your I2C bus. The actual display of themselves aren't actually central to the display itself. That comes a bit of a problem later on when I'm trying to do something with them. And they are by default in landscape. So that means that you need to run them like that one and not like these 2. So you've got to get around that in software. So, for the ones of you that don't know what a Nixie is, that is a Nixie tube. And that is not a very good photo. I apologise for it being so fuzzy. That's because it comes from the 70s. It's my excuse, I'm sticky with it. A Nixie tube is a valve. It is filled with neon and or other rare gases. And as you can see, there are some wires in there. And literally you apply a high voltage to the wire glows in the shape of whatever number, and that's what gives you the numbers from 0 to 7. You can actually see the wires that aren't lit. So if you look at that, there's a 9, there's a 0, there's an 8. And they are there most of the time. the other thing is they have depth. Because the wires are one in front of the other, number one is probably, I think I was at the back, but looks like you can see everything else in front of it. 0 is a bit further down the stack, 7 is nearer the front. So you actually see the wires both behind and in front of the one that's lit. But at the time, that was the only way you could do. This is before LEDs were very common. And it was a gobsmacking piece of technology in the 60s, 70s. Aesthetically, they are quite pleasing. They're quite nice to the eye. A little less harsh than LED displays, I think, personally. So that's what an Nixie tube is. So my aim was to try and duplicate that aesthetic. Now, a couple of problems here. I know about as much about glass blowing. Well, I know absolutely nothing about glass blowing, so I wasn't going to try and make any of my own glass. But managed to find a jam jar, although hexagonal, that would actually work. I tried the round jam jars, but they distorted the front too much, so you couldn't see the numbers. And then all I did was put a grid laser cut on the front of the OLED display. That's one with just the grid laser cut. And then you can see there, what I've actually done is laser etched the rest of those numbers in there. So that when you put it in front of the display, you get the display and you get all the wires, and it looks like there is a cathode grid from an actual Nixie tube in there. And I think they look quite effective. Of course, now you've then got to mount your jam jars so they don't look like jam jars. So I set them down into a recessed area and laser cut some supports for the Fak Nixies. So you can see you've got a piece of MDF supporting it. That's the OLED display there, and then just the one piece of acrylic laser etched with the front on them. So, I then came to another little problem. Do you remember when I said about the problems of the I2C displays? You can only get 2 on each I2C bus. Which means that you could only have a clock that displayed 2 digits. Which, that wouldn't work very well. You need really 6. You will notice I've got 5. As I said, I only got 5 OLED displays, but I wanted 6, and I wanted seconds. So I cheated with the seconds a bit. In fact, I cheated with the seconds quite a lot. I did a double digit for the seconds. So I display a landscape to give me a bit more space, put the 2 digits next to each other, and then laser etched it as if they were together. This has one brilliant effect that I wasn't expecting. There are people who are fanatics about Nixie tubes, and they come up to the clock and go, "Where did you get a double-digit Nixie tube from?" I haven't told them yet. It really blows their minds, because for that to happen, you'd actually have to have 21 wires stuck out of the bottom of this valve, and it would be huge. So, yeah, a little bit of interest for the older geeks out there who know about Nixies. So, then down to a bit more probably what you guys are used to. Got a Raspberry Pi Zero running the whole lot. Got that little board there, which is an I2C multiplexer. What that does is, from the one I2C channel into the Raspberry Pi, it gives me the ability to address 8 other I2C channels, which then means I can have 2 displays on each of those 8 channels. So that gives me the option of addressing 16 Nixies, or fixies I should say. Obviously I only need 5, but that instantly gets around the problem with you having only 2 I2C channels for each OLED display. Those are the OLEDs as you've seen before, just mounted. And then we've got this little board here. That is a solenoid driver, and I will come back to why that's there in a minute. So the software was actually fairly simple. For the time, I didn't bother with a real-time clock board. It would have been easy to have put one on, but my house has got so much Wi-Fi in it, you really don't need it. So I just let it connect to my Wi-Fi. The Raspberry Pi grabs its time from MTP, as a normal Raspberry Pi does, 0 setting up, and it just works. Downside is when you bring it to somewhere like this and it can't see my Wi-Fi, I have to tell it what the time is. That's rare, look at it. The OLED driver software, Adafruit do a lovely little piece of, a lovely little library for driving those little displays. And I'll hold my hand up, I didn't buy the displays from Adafruit, I got them from China. I'm not going to tell you why, you can guess. Adafruit do like to charge for the stuff they buy from China. Then again, they provide free libraries. I've just advertised them 4 or 5 times to you guys, please use Adafruit, because I use their libraries. There you go, that's my open source bit done. I2C multiplex driver, Adafruit do that as well. I got that one from Pimeroni. I buy a lot of stuff from Pimeroni, they are absolutely brilliant. They do all the software for that, and that is the library I use. I'm sure you can buy that from China. It's just they're not a nice little board. The fonts for the actual tubes, I found that on Google Fonts there is a Nixie tube font. Now isn't that a win? So, I just used it. It's simple as that. It's superb. It looks brilliant. The only problem I had was, it being a proper true type font, it's actually got an outline and not one wire, which is fine for the OLED displays, but I wanted to use the same font to etch those filters. And it gave me double digits because you've got an inner and an outer from the font. Eventually I found that the Eggbot project did a single stroke font. So the etched digits on the filters are actually using the Eggbot's single digit font rather than Google fonts. It was easier to use Google fonts to the OLEDs because the Adafruit OLED driver by default can use any true type font, so I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's also a degree of image manipulation. I tweak the display of the numbers depending on which number is being displayed so that it matches up with the etched front. I scale them and I also flip them 90 degrees to get them from landscape to portrait so that you can get the maximum amount of area on the display as possible. And that's just done with the Python PIL library. So, I said there was a solenoid driver. In the back of the clock is a solenoid, and that there is a piece of what is now brass rod. You've got a clock, it's got to go bong, hasn't it? So, solenoid hits that, hours every and on the hour, and so it bongs rather quietly, and it does have a bit of a clonk. I'm actually in discussion with a few people on Twitter about how to improve the clonk. Apparently, putting a piece of leather on the back of that solenoid so that it doesn't hit with quite a metal-to-metal contact improves things. At the moment, that hits at less than 10 milliseconds to try and get around the problem. But that's either very, very quiet or a clonk. You can't win. So that's still a bit of a work in progress. So you've got a nice looking clock, you want a case for it. MDF laser cut, stained with a dark oak wood stain, and then just the embossed bits filled with acrylic paint. Really that simple. All I did after making the box, because it was all done with tabs, I did put a little piece of brass around the outside just to try and hide the tabs, which, as you can see there, I didn't do particularly well because I got the wrong size of brass. Such is life. The other thing that the clock does that is going a little more geeky, I run a company that has a number of servers that have to be up 24/7. This sits in my living room. So what I actually use is the very last display, the seconds display, to give me host and service alerts from my servers. So I can be sat in the room and quite inoffensively the clock is saying either an H to say there's a host down or an S to say that there is a server down. That flips between seconds and displaying that once every 5 seconds. So normally it displays seconds, then it'll just flick to an H for a second and go back again. Most people don't even notice it's there. If you look at the one in the other room, it's doing that now, but it'll be going XX. And the reason it's doing XX is because it can't see my servers at the moment. And it'll sit there and it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, XX, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, XX. So you've got just a subtle display that I need to actually get off my backside and go and fix some servers. So, I'm Derek Woodroffe. You can get me Twitter, either Extreme Kits or Xtilec. Any questions? Stunned silence.
How are you getting the data from the Nagios server to your clock?
Oh, that's a completely different talk. It uses the Nagios API, and I've written a Python script to extract the host and service data out of it. I've actually got another one that sits in my computer room that is 8 neopixels. So you get host, service, and it's a complete display of sort of 8 or 9 different things. I mean, if you're interested in the code, give me a shout and I can chuck it your way. Any other questions? Yes?
How long will it take you overall, including puppy?
Including the puppy? Well, I'm still training the puppy now, so... I started it for November. I did between half an hour and an hour every night, and it was mostly finished by the 20th. So between 10 and 15 hours, I would guess.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. Any other questions? So if you want to pick my brains, I'm going to be stood out there until 3 o'clock or so. So just come and ask. Thank you very much for letting me bore you senseless.